On this channel, we've seen aliens used as a metaphor for all kinds of things, be it colonialism, communism, enlightenment, assault, rebirth, or even divorce. So I guess it was only a matter of time before we got to a movie where aliens are used in a metaphor for death itself. Yeah, this one goes a lot deeper than you might think.
All you'll ever be. When we get where we're going, we'll never be sick, we won't get any older, and we won't ever die.
A trio of retirees with the bad habit of sneaking into the estate next door to use the pool have found something remarkable. The estate's newest tenants have gathered up a handful of strange cocoons from the bottom of the ocean, placed them inside the pool, and somehow turned the water into a rejuvenating serum that can halt aging, stop cancer, and breathe new life into people in their golden years. However, when the trio learns that these tenants aren't exactly human, can they let go of their newfound reawakening, or will they make a deal with creatures from another world if it means they can live forever?
In 1980, Lily Finney Zanuck, the new wife of producer Richard Zanuck, procured a copy of the then unpublished novel Cocoon by David Saperstein. Eager to turn it into a film, she convinced her husband, along with his production partner David Brown, to option the story and produce it for 20th Century Fox, with a script rewritten by screenwriter Tom Benedict. After a couple of years, a major regime change at Fox, and a deal between the studio and Zanuck and Brown, who were in the process of severing ties with the studio, Cocoon was finally given the green light near the end of 1983. Robert Zemeckis, a relatively new director without a breakout hit at that point, was hired as director and spent a year in pre-production. After Fox executives screened a rough cut of Zemeckis' Romancing the Stone, though, they fired him. The following year, Romancing the Stone would prove to be a major hit, and the year after that, Zemeckis would do even better with Back to the Future, over at Universal, a movie he might not have had the chance to direct had he been allowed to continue on Cocoon. With Zemeckis out then, they gave the director's chair to the child actor turned director Ron Howard, fresh off the success of Splash. An alumnus of the Roger Corman School, Howard was an economical and fearless filmmaker with a proven track record when it came to genre work. Indeed, one of the main things that attracted Howard to Cocoon was its mixed genre of sci-fi, fantasy, drama, and comedy. He was also drawn to the idea of telling a story in a retirement community, as he and his wife, Cheryl, who, by the way, cameos here behind Ron's brother Clint, had been working on a similar idea for a few years. Cheryl Howard had studied geriatric psychology and told Ron that elderly people in a home tend to act remarkably similar to high schoolers. As somebody who has visited many nursing homes and assisted living facilities in my day, I can anecdotally attest to this being very, very true. Ron Howard did find it a little daunting to be working at a major studio under the same people who made blockbusters like Jaws and The Verdict, not to mention the incredible cast of veteran actors he'd be directing, but like I said, the 30-year-old indie darling was fearless. The veteran actors were an interesting challenge, as each had a different approach to their craft. For example, Don Amici, a Hollywood icon of the studio age, militantly stuck to the script and stage directions, whereas the one-time Western horse wrangler Wilford Brimley believed in spontaneity and treating the screenplay more like a set of suggestions. On the other hand, Hume Cronin, an ex-boxer, and Jack Gilford, a song and dance man, were largely physical actors. Nevertheless, they all responded well to Ron Howard and each other, even insisting that many of the physical stunts be done by the actors themselves, aside from some light breakdancing. Also, as has already been memed into oblivion, Wilford Brimley was only 50 years old when he worked on Cocoon, adding years to his life by dyeing his hair gray and having liver spots put on his skin by the makeup department. However, he still had to work to keep up with Amici, who walked 4 miles every morning to stay fit. In one scene, Hume Cronin, who only had one working eye at the time, accidentally landed an uppercut on another actor, knocking him out cold. And the touching scenes between Wilford Brimley and future The Neverending Story star Barrett Oliver were almost entirely improvised. Cronin and his wife, Jessica Tandy, also tried their hands at improv in this scene to great effect. While we're on the subject, Cronin and Tandy acted together in over a dozen films dating back to the 1940s, including in another great 80s benevolent alien movie I plan to cover one day, Batteries Not Included. Maureen Stapleton, Gwen Verdon, Herta Ware, Charles Lampkin, and even the 96-year-old silent movie actor Charles Rainsbury round out the rest of the veteran cast, with most of the elderly background characters being made up of real residents of the retirement homes where the movie was filmed. That is, aside from another Howard family member, Ron's mother, Jean Howard, for whom Cocoon rekindled a desire to act. As for Ron's father, the famous Rance Howard, he also shows up as this police detective near the end of the movie. Younger stars include Steve Guttenberg, who was riding high off the success of the Police Academy films and agreed to a pay cut in order to work with Howard, Brian Dennehy, who had recently broken through with 1982's First Blood, Tawny Welch, who actually beat out Madonna for her role and who happens to be the daughter of Raquel Welch, Tyrone Power Jr., who is the son of, you guessed it, Tyrone Power, Mike Nomad, who doubled as the film's diving instructor, the Ron Howard regular Jim Ritz, and one of Richard Zanuck's ex-wives, Linda Harrison, who's most well known for playing Nova in the original Planet of the Apes. Filming began in late August of 1984, entirely on location in St. Petersburg, Florida, and off the coast of the Bahamas. At the latter location, the underwater sequences were filmed late at night to make them appear deeper and more dramatic, and much of the boat work was timed to take advantage of the so-called golden hour, which basically just means sunrise and sunset. Though Howard had already learned to scuba dive under the tutelage of Mike Nomad for Splash, much of the rest of the crew, including Jessica Tandy and Wilford Brimley, were trained as well, even if their underwater appearances are mostly hidden behind masks and scuba gear. Locations back in St. Pete include 2 real retirement communities, the Coliseum Ballroom, the Confetti's nightclub, and this private estate, the Boca Ciega Bay House, I hope I pronounced that correctly, where one of the few constructed sets, the pool house, was built to match the architecture. This scene was filmed in the middle of a major tropical storm. Probably Tropical Storm Isidore, but it's hard to know for sure since it was a busy storm season that year, and the crew were on high alert, not entirely sure the building would survive. Some of the interior of the boat was also built as a small set, but other than that, everything else was done in real locations, something Howard was very comfortable with given his history with Roger Corman. One thing he wasn't entirely comfortable with, though, was the extensive use of storyboards that were necessary to plot out the film's complex special effects, put together by ILM under the supervision of Ken Ralston with the help of Mitch Suskin, Greg Canham, and the legendary concept artist Ralph McQuarrie. They would earn an Academy Award for their efforts, alongside Don Amici, who won for Best Supporting Actor. One fun anecdote from filming is that, rather than setting up a complicated and expensive Steadicam for the relatively tight sections of the retirement homes, Howard liberally borrowed from the plentiful supply of wheelchairs and mounted his cameras that way for more fluid camera movements. For the music, Howard brought in James Horner, a rising star who had already done Star Treks 2 and 3, Krull, and 48 Hours. Though he wouldn't get his first Academy Award nomination until the following year's Aliens, I have to admit Horner's work on Cocoon is absolutely incredible. He uses his signature style for much of the score, but He also plays around with steel drums mixed with electronic music to give it that feel of a sci-fi movie on a beach, as well as heavily integrating the big band style of classic 1940s jazz. I know I've gushed over James Horner before, but this is one of the best things he ever put together, and I wish the copyright bots would let me play a little bit of it for you, but alas, you'll just have to trust me. Originally slated for a Christmas release, Cocoon was bumped up to the summer due to positive test screenings, ultimately releasing in late June of 1985, where it competed with the likes of The Goonies, Daryl, and, fittingly enough, Back to the Future. It fared remarkably well, too, earning a total domestic box office gross of over $76 million, making it the 6th highest grossing film of the year. It was also a smash critical hit, with most critics fawning over the actors, the directing, the special effects, and the music. A sequel, Cocoon: The Return, was quickly greenlit, and Cocoon's influence can definitely be felt in the sci-fi family films that followed, particularly with the aforementioned Batteries Not Included. Its fame has dwindled in the decades since, and from what I can tell, most people only think of Cocoon as a sappy old family movie about elderly people in a pool. And I'm here to say that is a crime of the highest order. I'll admit, I was a bit surprised when my patrons voted for this movie. By the way, go check out my Patreon to get access to bonus content, vote on future topics like this one, and more. You guys are totally the bomb, yo! Anyway, I was surprised because I only vaguely remembered seeing it a half dozen times as a kid and didn't think much of it. However, watching it now as an adult is an entirely unexpected experience. It emotionally wrecked me in the best possible way, and subsequent rewatches for this review haven't diminished its impact. Like I said in my intro, this movie is about death. The very first scene lets you know that, with Don Amici and Wilford Brimley watching in somber futility as one of their neighbors dies, clearly an all too familiar experience for them. We then learn that Hume Cronin's character, Joe, is dying of cancer and has roughly 6 months left. We also see Herta Ware's character, Rose, struggling with late-stage dementia. Jumping ahead, the third act of the story begins with the pool losing its life-giving properties and with the alien leader Walter facing the death of a loved one for the first time in potentially hundreds of thousands of years, immediately followed by Rose's death, the scene that really breaks me. Rose's husband, Bernie, thus becomes a cipher for the central moral conundrum: is it right to cheat death? Up until this moment in the story, he was firmly against using the pool, refused to let Rose go, and argued with his fellow retirees about it. But once Rose dies, he takes her to the pool and begs Walter to save her, even though he ultimately can't. Cheating death has been a common theme of science fiction ever since Mary Shelley invented the genre with Frankenstein. And yes, I'm saying that knowing full well that my comments section will explode about it. Thank you guys for the engagement. But here, with the focus on people who are at the end of their lives, the idea of cheating death takes on a whole new dimension. These are characters who have been facing down death on a day-to-day basis, who have had to come to terms with it, and who have come to accept its inevitability as part of the cosmic plan. They have a chance to be rejuvenated, but they don't appreciate the cost until it is too late. Then they are offered one last gambit. They can live forever, but they have to leave everything and everyone they love behind. While most of them do choose to take advantage of the extended lifespan, dare I say the afterlife, Bernie chooses against it, even after Rose has died, and at no point does the movie try to portray this choice as anything but natural and believable. Indeed, the filmmakers apparently filmed Bernie's final scene in two ways, one in which he does join the group, and the one we see in which he doesn't. The first one felt wrong, betrayed the themes of the movie and Bernie's character arc, whereas everyone knew the second version felt right, felt true. It's the kind of choice that only makes sense if you've lived long enough, and it's one that the elderly actors had long philosophical discussions about behind the scenes, much to the bewilderment of younger cast and crew. As another example, when the characters played by Wilford, Brimley, and Maureen Stapleton, Ben and Mary, say goodbye to their daughter and their grandson and immediately have second thoughts, it's about more than just two people deciding to abandon their family to go on an outer space adventure. Again, it's about death, about having to leave behind everything that makes us human here on Earth. And anyone who's ever had to say goodbye to a loved one knows exactly what that feels like. Joe also considers his own choice: live for 6 months with his wife Alma, or live forever alone. He would have chosen the former, but thankfully, Alma renders it moot by agreeing to go with him, showing a willingness to repair the damage done by Joe's infidelity. These intense themes aside, though, I will still prop up this movie as a work of filmmaking art, because Ron Howard somehow juggles an incredibly complex plot, multiple dramatic shifts in tone, a lot of exposition, difficult practical effects, and one of the most impressive ensemble casts of the day. I can think of 100 reasons why this movie should never have worked, and yet, it does. It is an incredibly powerful movie that is as entertaining as it is poignant, and therefore, Cocoon is absolutely a sci-fi classic. And that's all for today, my fellow Earthlings. What's a movie that means more to you as an adult than it did to you when you were young? Let me know in the comments below, and while you're there, don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons. Thank you for watching, and until next time when we'll have a mighty good time, this is the Unapologetic Geek telling you to never be ashamed of what you love, as long as you're not hurting anybody.
You got a boner too? Blue steel. Cat couldn't scratch it.
I thought I was the only one.